Okay, recording has started, so let's see that. I'll be there.
After 15 minutes. We can Sorry, I have to pass those out. Okay, so my case study was, can Christians celebrate Diwali? And the situation was that there's these two missionaries who were originally already from India, which is important later. And they moved to another place called Dipri, India, and started a vacation Bible study there. And it was very successful for like the lower class people, which are called the Harijan, I think, in like the caste system. And a lot of the kids that went there came to know the Lord. And that includes Doharak. I don't know how to pronounce his name. We're just going to call him D, so then I can hopefully get it across. And D. Prasad came to know the Lord, and his life changed completely. And his parents compared that to his past 12 years of his former life before Christianity, and noticed that there was a clear difference. And that actually led them to wanting to know more about the gospel and becoming saved. So that was really cool. But the only hard part about that was that they were shunned by their whole entire village because they became Christians. And this is a very strong Hindu culture and religion-based area, so they were shunned completely because they decided to abandon that ways. And they had Mrs. and Mr. Pakaraj, which are the missionaries, come and they would visit with them since they were like the only friends they had left. And they would get like very lonely whenever the missionaries went out of town. But there was this one case where the missionaries did go out of town, and it was during this the celebration of Diwali, and they didn't realize how hard it would be for the family, the Prasads, because they were new to Christianity, and everyone else around them was celebrating Diwali. And it's not like just celebrated within the homes. It's actually like shown everywhere because everyone hangs around lights around their hometown, and they're outside, and they go to like temples to like fellowship and like worship the god Buddha. So they were feeling really left out. So when the missionaries came back, they were asked by the Prasads if they could celebrate Diwali, which is where the problem came up. And Mr. Pakarja said that he would pray over the situation, and he had two options. It was either to disregard the religious holiday altogether and not celebrate it and wait till like another holiday, or allow them to celebrate Diwali, but like change the holiday in a way, or like allow them to celebrate it with a different point of view. Obviously, this put the missionaries in a hard position because they don't really weren't expecting to face this when they came back. They do know that the area is very strongly Hindu, since they did come from India, and they know that if they choose to allow Diwali to be celebrated, then it might make the other people around them stumble, or even the Christians stumble, because people might start thinking that it's like similar to the Hindu ways and just convert back to Hinduism, and not see the clear difference. So there, there was also like other issues where if they wouldn't allow the celebration to happen, that the prasads would be tempted to return to their old habits and their old religion, because they were already ostracized from their community. And along with that, they also were dejected because they couldn't celebrate a very important holiday. So it might be tempted for them to go there and join their fellow community, whether it would be right or not. And like I said, Hinduism shapes everything that they do, so that makes it even harder, especially to break off from that. So I think with my solution, I said that I think that they should celebrate Diwali, but just with like a different perspective, because many times, I mean, it could just be an American point of view. Many times, our original Christian holidays got twisted by the world that we live in, but they still were able to, we're still able to celebrate them, but just in a different light, like Christmas, Easter, and Halloween, which was originally All Hallows Eve, all started with Christianity, but got twisted over time. And they obviously are now, the world is celebrating it in the wrong way. So I thought that they should still be able to at least decorate for Diwali, but if anyone around them was wondering why they were setting up for Diwali or for this holiday, they could explain to them the new meaning behind it, because basically Diwali is the holiday of light versus dark, which is why a lot of people put lights around their homes, because it's the defeat of a demon king, and it was like light winning over the darkness. And that's similar, very similar to Christmas or Easter, where light won over the darkness, and because Christ paid our sacrifice for our sins. Obviously, the basis is different, but I believe if they continue on with that, that Mr. Pakri should explain to them, like, yes, I prayed about it, and I believe that it's okay to do this, but if anyone asks you, you should give this explanation, because you're no longer living in darkness and you don't believe in the power of the demons over other demons, basically, like it was a face-off. They should be a light within their community, and then it might even open opportunities for them to share the gospel, because they're obviously setting up for the holiday in a way, but they're celebrating a completely different point of view. So that was what I came up with.
All right, let's get some feedback.
Was this a holiday celebrated because of their gods or something? Okay. I thought about Halloween too, how we celebrate Halloween. And I know not even all Christians do that, we never did at home. But I think today with Halloween, it's no one really knows where it comes from. If you ask kids on the streets, they're like, I don't know, I'm just getting candy, whatever, no, it's not really connected to the meaning anymore. So I'm not sure how connected this holiday is with the original meaning to like celebrate the gods. I think if it still is a lot, then I would be really careful with it, because I think sometimes you can celebrate it in a different way, but people don't really see that. And then it can be like, it might be wiser to not do it. But if it's not, like if everyone's just celebrating something and they don't really know where that comes from, then I don't necessarily see a problem with it. And you can use that to be a witness to and share the gospel, maybe. But that's what I thought.
Yeah. I looked it up just because I wanted to know what it was, because the case study was on it. But it is a festival of lights, and it's celebrating like light over darkness, good over evil. But the main point of it is the gods. There's like, within the different like case systems, there's like 5 main gods that they celebrate. And so then it's like a 5-day celebration where they visit the temples and like worship the gods, and they pray that the gods would like help the ancestors. They light up everything to celebrate the gods' victory over their enemies, and they open doors to invite the good gods in to give them a blessing. So like everybody knows it's about God, because they open their doors, they go to the temples, they worship the gods specifically during these times. And it seems like, at least from what I read, that like the point is to try and get the good gods to come bless them, and like they're trying to keep the good gods happy in a sense too. I don't know, it was interesting.
Good. You guys want to contribute something?
Might as well.
I didn't really have enough time to think through this. I guess what I'm thinking about right now is different traditions that we have in our country, and some Christians are okay with doing a lot of things, and some Christians aren't, and we got to make sure we consider those things, like what the Bible says about not offending your brother if he thinks that you should celebrate a certain day or not celebrate a certain day. But I don't really know about this situation, because they got to consider that, I guess, if they're celebrating Diwali, what other new believers are going to see that and maybe stumble because of it and think that it's okay to be associated with worshiping gods and stuff like that.
James, you had something?
I guess I'm curious with the current religion in India, Hinduism. I wonder if you join this festival or you kind of look like you're participating in it, if you're kind of saying like, oh, you can worship all these gods and you can add Jesus to it. And so I think there's some good in being separate in a case like this and just standing apart from a holiday.
Okay. Good. Are you going to?
Oh, sorry. I was gonna say, yeah, that was a real like struggle, because as I was like researching this and also reading commentaries along with like the Bible too, it was like, wow, maybe I should change my point of view, because it was really hard. Because like Laurel said, and everybody else said too as well, it does celebrate the gods and could make the other people stumble. The only thing that I had with that, though, is that they literally had like no other Christian friends whatsoever, because they only had the missionaries. And that's why whenever the missionaries left, they would always like feel very lonely or like dejected because they had no one else to go to. One of the things that I thought of was like in Deuteronomy 5:6-7. 1 minute. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt. Oh, wrong words. 7-8. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself a carved image or any likeness of anything that is in heaven or above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth, which clearly shows them Buddha like is often shown in a carved image, And a lot of the people, like Laurel said, would be going to the temples and like celebrating Buddha. And one of the things that I thought of was like, you could be different. Like, for example, I, like in my workplace, I celebrate like Easter and Christmas and all that, but I don't have it as the same as my secular friends who don't know the gospel or don't really know the meaning. And it opens up an opportunity for us, like when they're talking about the religion, or like not even the religion, the celebration, to be like, no, this is what we believed in, this is where it started, which it shows the importance, like in John 3:16, that's what Mr.
Prasad is his last name.
Thank you. Prasad should like, one of the things I forgot to mention is that he should like continue to teach them the importance of Jesus' story, like in John 3:16, where it says, "For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believes in him shall not perish but have everlasting life." Yes.
I do see your point about celebrating it, but celebrating in a different way, because we do that here, where a lot of times in Christian homes you'll see the manger scene and stuff like that at Christmas that points to Christ, and people who don't believe in Jesus, they'll just have Santa and reindeer and everything like that in their homes. But I mean, then there's Christians that do have Santa and reindeer too. So I don't know what's to be said about that, as like when it talks about being in the world, not of the world. Everybody has their own opinions on that. And same thing with Easter, like people put a cross or an empty tomb depiction in their home, like a picture on the wall or something. And some people have Easter bunnies and Easter eggs for their decorations in their home. And even my own like marriage right now, it's different, because the way I grew up celebrating Easter and what we use for decorations is different than what my wife's family used for decorations. And I'm like, I never did that, but is it wrong to do that or is it not? And so it's really hard when it comes to holidays, because a lot of people adopt certain traditions and a lot of people say, no, that doesn't have anything to do with the Bible and what the biblical reason we're celebrating for is, so we don't need to do that and add that. So it's just really hard to know like what's right and what's wrong. And yeah.
I definitely understand like the multiple sides and like what Jules is saying. But I would kind of caution them against celebrating whatever this tradition, Diwali or something.
It's basically the victory, I think it's Shiva, over one of the 10 avatars of Vishnu.
Sure.
Okay, so it's some of the main gods and avatars involved in this.
Yeah, and like that's kind of the problem I see with it. Like when you guys are discussing different like holidays and things, like it's kind of similar but kind of not in how I view it. Like for instance, Christmas is celebrated the same day, like same time, but like different ways by Christians, non-Christians. But at the same time, it's different because maybe I'm wrong, but Christians have been celebrating Christ coming as a baby since like he came. And it's not something that's hidden. It's not something that people don't know that Christians do. Like, and then like Santa came along after, and then like different traditions. And there are some things where it sounds like there was another pagan tradition where Christians may have taken candles or like the Christmas tree, but that's like a different aspect. So like Christians have always been celebrating Christmas, whether it was whatever day it was on. And it's associated with the same time. So I feel like it's different, because if they were to celebrate it, it would kind of then be starting a new thing and then trying to communicate, oh, no, we're not like worshiping the gods, we're worshiping our own God. And just because like it's not openly common, I don't think it would be helpful to celebrate it. But then like for like Halloween, we personally don't celebrate it. We did when we were little, and then we grew up and we read a bunch of articles. We learned about like the meaning and how it started. I live in Anoka, Minnesota. It's actually the Halloween capital of the world.
Oh, man.
Not the United States, the world.
Wow.
And they will decorate everything. Anoka is huge. There's like different cities in it, and there's big cities in it too. But it focuses on evil and like different gods and different things. People dress up. Witches from the area, like Witches Association, will come out in the streets and they'll dance, they'll do different things, and it's just like a nasty, nasty, ugly thing. And like since learning about it, we're just like, this is so anti-Christian. This is where every satanic practice comes out where like we cannot celebrate this in good conscience. And I feel like it's kind of similar to this because like they're kind of celebrating their gods and things. And so like what I would kind of propose as like my own solution as I see it is maybe like celebrate light over darkness and like good over bad, but at a different time. And I think that maybe they could recreate or create a new holiday tradition, because if they don't celebrate this, everyone sees that they're dark, their home's dark, not participating. And then if they were like 10 days later or how many ever days later they start a new thing and then suddenly their house is lighted up, all the neighbors would be like you have this in your alternatives list. But then all the neighbors would just be like, why are they celebrating this and what's their point? And it reminds me of like when Paul went to, is it Athens or something, where they were celebrating something and worshiping their gods, and he's like, no, there's one true God, and he was able to like share the gospel with that.
Well, I'd like to use an analogy here just to give you a basis of thinking. Think of a river. A river has a current, okay? Sometimes when we're trying to decide things like this, we have to ask, to what extent are you traveling with the current? To what extent are you traveling upstream against the current? And what kind of an impact is that going to make? So in America, even though there's a lot of Santa Claus and reindeer and all that, there is still, even today in a postmodern America, there is still a current associated with Christmas that says it's the birth of Jesus Christ, whether people know who he is or, in other words, to celebrate Christmas in our culture is not to paddle upstream in that sense. We have there's a foundation, and it's legitimate. Easter the same way, and we could debate the name for Easter, but the same way. Halloween is a different story. It really is, and Christians are very much different. I did not know that detail about your hometown. That's very interesting. What do you do in a Hindu culture where there's no Judeo-Christian background? Okay, and all the current is heading in one direction. Okay, to try to stand for Jesus Christ and represent him in the context of that celebration is to paddle upstream, and you'll probably end up being carried downstream even if you're paddling upstream. So to some degree, the Judeo-Christian background versus a Hindu background is going to have an effect on how you deal with this. If you're not able to do it without being drawn in to the current of that culture, then at very best you're going to come up with something syncretistic. It's going to be very, very difficult. They might even smile at you and say, "Oh yeah, you're worshiping Jesus and his victory, and you can make your substitutions." But that's because they're polytheistic and they're okay with that. So what have you done? You've added a Jesus to the celebration, and you've not actually made a statement of the uniqueness of Christ like Paul did in Athens. So I think that has a lot to do with how you're going to decide. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's, again, this is what made it really hard, is that there are two solutions, and it's really hard because I know how hard change can be, and going from like celebrating this every single year to all of a sudden stopping it would be really hard, especially since you're already like away from the community. But another thing I thought of was like, you're also a new creation. You are no longer living for yourself, but for Christ, like it says in Galatians 2:20. You're also supposed to be a city set on top of a hill and letting your light shine for Christ. So they could also, like Laurel said, kind of like do their own thing in a way and maybe set a different day, which is what, while I was studying this, I was thinking through that as well, because they did mention how when I think the Christians were captured by pagans at one point, and they changed the Christmas tree to representing the Trinity, I think, if I got that correct. And they kind of changed that in a way, which is obviously not how our world views it anymore, but they changed that. So I thought maybe instead of like taking the tree idea, but more of like Christmas and Easter and like finding another time to just celebrate, or during the time of Diwali, since you're already gone from the community, you shouldn't fear what they think. If you're taking time away from that, you could get together as a Christian body and celebrate just your new hope in Christ and be able to worship and fellowship together and just not celebrate Diwali. I don't know if that made any sense, but.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I was just moving.
Oh, I thought you were reaching for it.
You swatting flies.
Yeah.
Anybody else want to comment on it? Well, when you talk about they being isolated because there's not a Christian community, that is tough. There's no doubt about that. But there's where you have to make your theological evaluation and say, does the fact that I'm the only Christian in my family in this community somehow legitimize or excuse me, from associating or, from not associating with them? In other words, if there was a contingency of believers there, then it'd be easier not to. But there's where you have to be careful that you don't allow, just the number of Christians there to make a determination for you. I mean, when Paul was in Athens and he spoke about the one true God, he spoke up about it. And when he spoke of the resurrections, they mocked. Remember, some mocked. There were a few that believed. But for the most part, it was a rejection of his message there in Athens.
Yeah, that's one of the things I forgot to mention is that this is very much an honor-shame culture, and they could view it as them stepping out of line, like, oh, you're already from the lowest caste, now you're going out of line and, like, trying to change our tradition, or, like, completely ignoring our tradition altogether, and, like, it makes it kind of a gray area, because you can't really control what other people think about you. You don't want them to think that you're breaking the caste system completely and that you're better than like everyone else in this way, because that won't be a very shining light. It would turn me away from the gospel if I was a Hindu and people were breaking away from their caste system completely and not respecting the other people, if that makes sense. So yeah, that's it.
I think it depends on how they go about it. Like, I think they can do it respectfully and, like, discard it and not celebrate it. But to kind of use a pun, like, I think with their house being darker, they can be a light for Christ because they're different. And I think it'd be better to do that rather than try and celebrate it.
In Brazil, the carnival time, which of course is very carnal. In fact, in Rio, on Carnival Day, the mayor actually hands the keys to the city symbolically to the people to party. And there are a lot of Christians that will do retreats at that time. They call them carnival retreats. Our churches did that, even up in the Northeast. We'd go to a camp someplace or retreat center, and we would celebrate something else, and we would honor Christ and to help our people get away from that. You could look at that as an escape and say, well, they're running away from, the challenge. Well, maybe not. I mean, if there's a way you can do that to kind of take the heat off a little bit during the intensity of that moment, then, is it really wrong to do that? I don't personally think so. So that is another option that you might offer to people if it becomes really hot for them, at that moment. Yeah.
I just thought of something, one of the situations in the Bible where Lot was in the city of Sodom and Gomorrah, and he could have moved out of there and got away from the influence, but he stayed and was influenced to do kind of accept some of the things that they did there, even though he knew they weren't right. But his wife ended up loving the city so much that it cost her life. So I don't know if in a situation like this, if they're celebrating a holiday, maybe that is a good time. Just like, well, let's go on a vacation to another country right now or something, then come back after they're done. But sometimes you can try to change the culture, but if you can't, if you're only one person and it's so culturally ingrained, it's like maybe if it's going to influence you in the wrong way, maybe you should just get out of there and then come back after it's over. I don't know.
Well, I would say that the goal here is not to change the culture. You're not asking the question, will this enable me to change the culture? The question is this a cultural expression that is clearly wrong biblically? Because culture is not neutral. Culture is an expression of values. And so my goal would not be to change the culture, but to take a stand for what you believe is truth. Yeah, because you're not going to change that culture. I mean, humanly, Yeah.
I was gonna say that they could travel with the missionaries to the other town, but I'm pretty sure since Diwali is, it's like it's a national holiday. Even the people who were the missionaries were originally from India anyway, so if they tried to get away, they'd have to like go to a complete different country instead. Which I don't even know. I'm not sure if they could do that financially because they were already the lowest caste. But they could maybe, I'm trying to figure out how to say this. They could maybe like gather together in one home just for the week or however long Diwali is and remind each other daily, be in the scriptures daily, standing strong in like their belief even when they're tempted, because even like in Joshua 1:9 they're talking about being courageous in this like very different culture and like secular area and like not fearing what other people think, and like Laurel said, it could open an opportunity for them to not have their lights out and everything. I thought of a maybe middle ground, but I'm not positive if it would work. But maybe like setting up their lights, but then just not doing all the other like worship stuff. But that opens another issue where they could be tempted to go back to that as well.
Yeah. Go ahead, James.
As far as standing out goes, I think at this point, whatever they do, they're going to stand out because they've already been ostracized. So if they kind of do a couple of the things to the festival, I think people in the community are going to be kind of like, really, like, you're still trying to be one of us, and we don't see you as that. I think it would have more of an impact on the community if you just totally go to a different date and maybe do what Laurel suggests. But
I'm guessing, back to Miriam, what you said, I'm guessing that the majority of the people in India probably don't know much about the historical background of this. They just do it because it's a fun holiday, And when we were kids, we did Halloween, Back then, I dressed up as a woman. You'd never do that now. I had lipstick on, my mother's high heels. I mean, but it wasn't an issue back then, But we never, we thought, we heard of ghosts and goblins and all that stuff, but it wasn't but if we were living back in the early days of the church when Christmas was first becoming a thing, in the celebration on December 25th, we might be having a different discussion about Christmas because there's a lot of debate as to what the historical roots are, but most people seem to acknowledge some sort of a winter solstice festival that went on at that time to pagan gods, and the Christians decided to celebrate the birth of Christ at that time in order to give them an option, But so we might find ourselves even viewing Christmas differently if we were living it. But over the centuries, that's kind of gotten lost in the background. Even the history is a little bit in question, and so people just, was the Christmas tree, the celebration of the goddess of the solstice, or not? Nobody really knows for sure, and so we just don't care. We say, well, green refers to life in Christ, and the evergreen, Christ is everlasting, and all that. So, but I think here you've got a situation that is so dominant and so clear that to fall into that, and like you said, James, they're already ostracized, and sometimes the best thing to do is just be ostracized. In other words, get it over with in the sense of let people know, rather than trying to stick your big toe and knees into it little by little,
Right, and like, I feel like it's so easy for me to say they should just do it because from viewing it from like my cultural lens of being an American, like I celebrate Christmas, Halloween, and not Halloween, no, Christmas and like Easter, and not in the fact that like the world celebrates it. And like even my church did like a trunk or treat, but not because of how the world did it, just as an opportunity to reach out. But it a lot of people wouldn't even, like you said and like Miriam said, wouldn't know the backgrounds of that. And it's very easy for me to be like, oh, I can just be different from the world because America, if you're ostracized from like one group of people, you can always find another group and just move on. And there's churches everywhere. But here they don't have that community. They don't have the strongness. They may be like dejected, but I feel like they can, or I believe that they can find new hope in Christ and find new hope of like gathering together and just reminding each other during that time of why they started and what made the change and everything. And people there may not know the difference. Like I think even for Chinese New Year, for example, from China, I don't even know if people there know the full context because it's a huge celebration, but what were the origins of it? I don't even know the origins of it. I just knew growing up, like, we don't celebrate like they do. We can do all the fun things, like have the food and maybe bake some like right in Chinese, but we're not gonna celebrate like the zodiac animals. And people there might find it as a time, like kids might find it as a time to get like money or have school off and just celebrate. But the core of it is not Christ-like as Christians. And that's what makes it harder, because in different cultures, it can be very like shame culture, fear and power, honor and shame. And in America, we don't have that as much. Like it's more of, I believe what I believe, and if you don't believe that, that's okay. We can just move on and be friends. It's not so much in this case.
All right, hey, time's up, thanks. Okay, appreciate your comments. As always, it's not an easy one, but that's the point. All right, thanks, guys. Good job presenting.